Welcome back everyone to part 2 in my ongoing Final Fantasy XIV Retrospective series. If you haven't seen part 1, then I highly encourage you to do so, especially if you've never played the game before and you don't care about spoilers. Now, some of the feedback I got on my last video was that it was a bit short on the analysis part and much longer on the summary part, which I think is a fair criticism. Not to make excuses for myself, but as I said in part 1, A Realm Reborn's story is a bit of a mess narratively, while also not having as much depth and complexity to it as some of the later expansions. So, in all honesty, the reason why I may have felt like the analysis part was a bit shorter was because I don't really have much to say about A Realm Reborn. It's certainly dense from a narrative and plot perspective, but not necessarily as meaty as the later expansions in terms of theme and character work. All that is to say is I'm going to be trying to expand the analysis sections a bit more. I'd like to promise that I'm going to try to abbreviate some of the summary parts a bit, but, well, I tried that. It turns out this game is really hard to summarize succinctly, even the expansions. So yeah, this is probably going to be another pretty long video. I apologize for nothing! Anyway, let's talk about Heavensward.
And so they came, at a friend's behest. Heroes once celebrated as saviors of Eorzea, brought low through treachery, their names blackened with royal blood.
But even now, I cannot let go of my dream. My dream of a tomorrow in which no child need freeze alone in the snow.
From tragedy and sacrifice, we rise to greet a new dawn.
We did everything right! Everything that was asked of us, and still it came to this!
Oh, do not look at me so. A smile better suits a hero.
I lost my family to Nidhogg's flames, and 'twas with fury in my heart that I took up the lance.
How can this be? A millennium of prayer and the eye's power combined, and still you stand.
Fill this vessel with your light. Still the hatred within our hearts and bless us with eternal grace!
Mark well our faces, warrior of light, for we are the warriors of darkness.
I am the first brood. I am vengeance incarnate. I am Nidhogg!
The endless cycle of violence between man and dragon was born of our forefathers' treachery. Let his hatred die with him, I say! Let us sheathe our swords and go in peace!
A future shaped by the choices we made, in ways we could never have foreseen.
Remember the face of your enemy, brothers and sisters! Remember it! And strike back!
Such strength, it defies all reason.
Upon the souls of they who have sacrificed themselves to pave the way for peace, we will never abandon our cause.
Why must you do this, Father? Now is the time to renounce the lies which led us down this path, to start anew! You of all people should understand. We will not falter! We brought our world to the brink of destruction, and now we must save it.
See here the true nature of the Highborn! With lies and deception they lead us to our doom!
and tear down the very pillars of our society? Our history, our values, everything we have built over 1,000 years?
1,000-year war cannot be ended in a day. It may take generations. What thou dost begin, thy children must continue.
Heavensward marks a bit of a turning point for the story of Final Fantasy XIV. Firstly, we have new voice actors that are a vast improvement over the original. Yay!
'Tis all my doing. I believed myself the only one who truly understood Eorzea's woes.
The dawn's light will shine again. So long as we have these specious accusations hanging over us, we will struggle to achieve anything.
British accents make everything better. But it also marked where the writing definitely started to improve. The story became less about world building and more about the characters and their struggles. It also started to flirt with some darker themes, not to the same level that Shadowbringers and Endwalker would eventually run gleefully past the finish line with, but definitely a bit more mature? That feels like a bad descriptor, but you'll see what I mean. Picking up where we left off, the three remaining scions, Alphino, Tataru, and the Warrior of Light, enter Ishgard for the first time, and it is a mess, as you would expect of a city-state that has been in a constant state of war for over 1,000 years. The poor are left abandoned in the lower parts of the city in an area called the Broom, while the wealthy elite and churchfold live in the upper sections called the Pillars. You've been summoned by Haurchefant's father, Count Edmond de Fortin, who is quite a reasonable man and takes you on as wards of the Great House so the other Ishgardians don't give you any trouble.
Granted, my decision will have raised eyebrows in the vault and in the halls of the other high houses. But so long as you continue with your altruistic endeavors, I doubt my honored peers will feel moved to voice their concerns.
See, Ishgard is a bit of an isolationist state. They hardly ever open their doors to outsiders, with the exception of wards of great houses. All of this draconian law comes straight from the Church of Halone the Fury, or the Holy See. The See is basically the theocratic ruling body of Ishgard, and they take a strong stance against anyone they suspect of heresy, which, as with most religions, means anyone who disagrees with them. In this case, the target of their ire is Tataru for some reason. After clearing her name through trial by combat, you meet Archbishop Thordan VII, who apologizes for all that nasty business. Seems like he's a really reasonable guy. Oh, he's working for Ascians? And he just tells you this. But it's okay, he's using them and he's totally in control of the situation. He can leave whenever he wants to, guys, seriously. Yikes. Meanwhile, back in the outside world, both the leader of Libsalominsa, Merlwib, and the leader of Gridania, Kani Senna, tell you their nations are still open to you, despite Ul'dah wanting your head. But that has to take a back seat, because Rauban is set to be executed. With help of Yugiri and her Doman shinobi, you help free him, only to find out that Lolorito, the other guy Rauban tried to kill at the party, hijacked the whole coup attempt when he discovered Tiddly Dee's plan. He replaced the poison in the Sultana's drink with harmless poison that merely made it look like she was dead. He also bought off the Crystal Braves. So, yay? Still kind of f***ed, dude, but at least you're no longer wanted fugitives and the Sultana is still alive. Cool. If we're done with the convoluted, useless plans, can we go back to Ishgard, please? Things in Ishgard aren't looking good as the heretics and the dragons prep for another assault on the city. Speaking with Emmerich and Alphino, you decide the only way to bring an end to this conflict is to confront Lady Iceheart herself. After all, she seemed somewhat reasonable in your last encounter, despite turning into a demigod bent on revenge against Ishgard. Oh, you're also bringing this guy. His name is Estinian. He's the Azure Dragoon, an elite champion of Ishgard who specializes in killing dragons. Yeah, I see no way this can go wrong. Iceheart reveals her true name is Yaseo. Fun name. She also tells you that despite what the Holy See preaches, the dragons didn't betray humanity when they first arrived in Ishgard. See, the church preaches that men arrived in Ishgard and had a tenuous peace with Midgard-Sormer's brood. But one of the dragons, Nidhogg, became suspicious of man's glory, and especially of the great king Thordan, and his knights 12. He's basically King Arthur in case it wasn't painfully obvious. Nidhogg slew Thordan and thus started the war. According to Ysayle, however, humanity first brokered peace after Saint Shiva fell in love with the white dragon Hraesvelgr. After her death, humanity and dragonkind managed to live together in peace for a number of years until Ratatoskr, these names are hard to say, Nidhogg's broodmate, decided to help bring humanity closer together. She revealed that the eyes of dragons offer immense power and offered to help gift Thordan and his knights some of this power to aid them. But, as can be expected from humans at this point, the offer of free power was too tempting, so they killed her, plucked out her eyes, and ate them. Congratulations, humanity, on consistently proving that you are in fact the worst in any given situation. Istinian doesn't buy it and suggests we find Nidhogg and just kill him, but Alphino and Ysayle convince him that's a monumentally stupid idea, as people have been trying to do that without success for the past 1,000 years. Instead, it's decided that the only way to bring the conflict to an end is to talk to Hraesvelgr, the only reasonable dragon who decided to remain neutral in the conflict. Istinian agrees to try the diplomatic approach on the condition that they try his stabby method should that not work out. Upon meeting Hraesvelgr, though, it becomes clear that the dragon has no interest in becoming involved in the war. Having a cynical viewpoint of both humanity and his brother Nidhogg, Hraesvelgr has decided to remain in his cloud-top abode away from the fighting. He also tells Ysayle that her primal form isn't the real Shiva, his former love, but a product of her own imagination and idealization of Shiva. This causes Ysayle to abandon the group and have an existential crisis. So, that went well. Plan B then? With Sid's help once again, you manage to use a new kind of flying machine to reach Nidhogg's lair with Istinian. Istinian reveals his secret weapon, Nidhogg's Eye. See, the Azure Dragoon isn't just a champion of Ishgard because he is good at killing dragons. Granted, that is a big part of it, but it's also because he has Nidhogg's Eye. The first Azure Dragoon carved it out in battle with the worm, and ever since it has been the source of their power when fighting their sworn enemies. Using the power of the eye, you defeat Nidhogg, and Istinian pulls out the other eye, only to realize it's the wrong eye. Wait, what? So yeah, turns out Hraesvelgr gifted one of his own eyes to Nidhogg after being goaded and somewhat blackmailed into doing it. So what happened to Nidhogg's other eye then? Who knows? I'm sure this won't lead to anything bad. That's called foreshadowing. As you are pondering this odd turn of events, Ishgard is once again attacked by heretics and dragons, but Ysayle herself appears and implores them to stop. Nidhogg is dead and the war is over, she says. Taking advantage of the brief moment of respite, you informed Emmerich of the truth about the Dragon Song War and how it started. Emmerich is shaken, but vows to reveal the truth to the church and the people of Ishgard, which goes about as well as you would expect. God damn it. Turns out Archbishop Thordan doesn't want the truth getting out, and despite it being revealed that Emmerich is his illegitimate son, he orders a hit on the man. With Emmerich wounded and captured by the Holy See, you seek out the help of a woman named Hilda. She's a mongrel of a half-Elezen who has particular beef with the clergy and the nobility in general. In case it wasn't obvious at this point, she's supposed to be a clear shout-out to Tifa from Final Fantasy VII. After enlisting her help, you make a plan to break into the vault of the clergy's main religious building and confront Thordan while the others free Emmerich. After fighting your way through Thordan's elite knights known as the Heavensward,
hey, that's the name of the show,
you catch up with Thordan, who is about to flee. Emmerich pleads with his father to admit the truth and drop all this nonsense.
Why must you do this, father? Nidhogg is fallen. There is no need for further deception. Now is the time to renounce the lies which led us down this path. To start anew!
And tear down the very pillars of our society? Our history, our values, everything we have built over 1,000 years? A fool to the last.
Thordan clearly doesn't care, so you and your best buddy Haurchefant go to capture him and... No, I can't do this again. No, please.
Look out!
Damn it. Thornton then flees, muttering something about Azus Law, while you're left to say goodbye to the one man who gave you shelter when no one else would.
You are unharmed? Forgive me. I could not bear the thought of...
Oh, do not look at me so.
A smile better suits a hero.
Hold it together. It then falls to you to inform his father of what happened, and...
Don't. Please. A knight lives to serve, to protect, to sacrifice. There is no greater calling. Leave me to mourn and give chase. For my son and for the nation he loved. Go!
His sacrifice shall not be forgotten.
My son.
I fucking hate this game. Searching for more information about this Azus Law, you seek out the Vanu Vanu tribe, a group of bird people, not to be confused with the other tribe of flightless bird people, the Ixal back in A Realm Reborn, that live on floating islands in the Sea of Clouds. They inform you that Azus Law is a floating research facility built by... guess who? It's the Alligans, of course it is. They tell you that the only way to reach Azus Law is through the use of a key that, wouldn't you know it, was eaten by the primal Bismarck. No, not the German Kaiser. Bismarck is a giant flying whale summoned by a tribe of hostile Vanu Vanu. So, after one of the worst and most boring primal fights I've ever suffered through, you retrieve the key only to be immediately paralyzed by Archbishop Thornton and his Asians as they steal the key from you. Great. In retrospect, we should have known that he was a dick when he revealed he was working for the Asians. You come back to the Vanu Vanu, only to witness them be captured by the Garleans. Oh, I almost forgot about them. Where the fuck have you guys been all this time? Turns out the Garleans have been dealing with a succession crisis after the first emperor of Garlemald died without naming an heir. Varys, his grandson, eventually manages to seize the throne for himself, and it is here that you are first introduced to him, and he's very grumpy. I mean, look at his face. This guy just always looks like someone cracked a huge fart in his direction. Anyway, the Garleans are also after Azus Law for reasons they refuse to divulge, and no, they aren't interested in working with you. Wow. Rude. You then try and pursue Thornton to Azus Law, but are blocked by a large energy shield. That's probably what the key was for. So, without a clear way forward, the Scions decide to return to Mordona and regroup to discuss their options. But there is good news. Some of the other Scions dug through the rubble in the tunnel you used to escape Ul'dah, and while there is no sign of Thancred or Y'shtola, they do find Y'shtola's staff. And according to anime rules, if there's no body, there's a good sign that they aren't dead. Sure enough, Orion J speculates that Y'shtola used a forbidden teleportation spell called Flow to escape, which sort of works like regular teleportation but sends your soul through the lifestream. The caveat is there is a good to fair chance that you could just end up stranded there with no way to return to your physical body. With the help of Connie, Senna, and her seed seers, as well as Y'shtola's sister, you manage to summon her spirit back from the livestream. Yay! Catgirl waifu is back! After being given new clothes sewn by Tataru, boo, you inform Y'shtola of the energy shield problem you're dealing with. And while she herself doesn't know a way past the barrier, she claims her old mentor, Master Matoya, might. So, you set out to find Master Matoya, which brings you to the old abandoned colony of New Charlian, where Alphino and Alize grew up. The colony has been taken over by a group of goblins who have set up a sort of trading post they call Idleshire. You eventually find Matoya in her abode of an underground cave assisted by magical frog familiars. When the Charlian colonists decided to abandon it around the time of the 7th Umbral Calamity, Matoya stubbornly refused to leave. She is a grumpy old woman who I just loved so f***ing much. I don't know what it is about her, but her snarky remarks in relationship with Y'shtola are really just entertaining. Y'shtola has always been somewhat of a mystical, unknowable character up to this point, and it's nice to see her being brought down to a more simple state. She's a student again instead of the master. Like, just imagine if somewhere in The Lord of the Rings we got to see Gandalf meet his old master who treated him like an errand boy. Actually, no, that sounds horrible. I would hate that. Anyway, Matoya sends you to the library to go and retrieve a book that explains how to create a device powerful enough to penetrate the energy barrier around Azys Law. After retrieving it, you bring it to Sid, who adds the device to his airship. The plan is to use the Eye of Nidhogg to give the device enough etheric energy to pierce the shield. You say goodbye to everyone, and Orion J gives you some more white auracite for those pesky Asians, as well as Horshafon's shield as a keepsake. F*** you, Orion J. You make your way back to Azys Law and bust through the shield, only to realize that the Garleans have been waiting for this very moment and immediately attack you. Things aren't looking good when suddenly Ysayle, back from her existential crisis, comes riding on Hraesvelgr. God, that name is hard to say. Leaping off the dragon, she once more takes the form of Shiva in one of the coolest f***ing scenes in the expansion.
Oh goddess, born of mine own hopes and dreams, for the last time, I beseech you, fill this vessel with your light, still the hatred within our hearts, and bless us with eternal grace!
damaging the Garlean's airship long enough for you to escape. The Garleans then kill her in retaliation.
Farewell, warrior of light, and thank you for showing me the way.
No! God damn it! Why do you insist on killing all the cool characters, Square Enix? Why?
Fare you well, my lady.
On Azislaw, you're once again blocked by a new obstacle. Another part of the facility you need to get to is floating above the rest of it, and you have no way of getting to it. Wait, didn't we, fly here? Why can't we use the... Oh, the ship is too damaged, huh? How convenient. You then seek information from a captive dragon here named Tiamat, Bahamut's broodmate. Turns out she's to blame for the primal Bahamut being trapped in the moon. See, the real Bahamut was killed by the Alligans as a way to torture Tiamat into summoning a primal version of him that they hoped to control. Jesus Christ. Are there any Alligans that weren't psychopathic assholes? Okay, yeah, fair point. Midgardstormer, who has been following you and offering commentary all this time, wants you to free her, but Tiamat demands to remain as punishment for her actions. He then acknowledges your own strength regardless of the Blessing of Light, and decides you have earned it. He grants you back the Blessing of Light, stronger than before. He then transforms into a bigger dragon to carry you up. Wait, you could do that the whole time? I know you were trying to teach me self-reliance or whatever, Grandpa, but you and I need to have a serious talk after all this is over. With Midgardstormer's help, you manage to reach the Etherochemical Research Facility at the heart of Azislaw and pursue Thornton inside. In the core of the facility, you encounter two Ascians, Igiorum and a reconstituted Lahabrea. Yay, he's back. They reveal they've been working towards reviving their old god Zodiarch. He's been mentioned before, but never in much detail. Turns out he's like a dark mirror version of Heidelin. They fought a long time ago, and he lost, and now they want him back. Cool. Dark wizards worship a dark god. Never seen that before. Despite their combined power, you manage to defeat them both and kill Igiorum with the white auracite Oriange gave you. Lahabrea tries to flee, but before he can, Thornton and his knights arrive with a large coffin. I don't like where this is going. Thornton reveals that the other eye of Nidhogg remains in the coffin, buried with the first Azure Dragoon. He declares that the Ascians' time is finished, and how humanity is done being their pawns. He then uses the power of Nidhogg's eye to become the primal version of Thornton, and turns the body of the Azure Dragoon and the eye into a massive f***-off anime sword. I'm not even kidding, I love this game. He then kills Lahabrea, absorbing his essence into an aether-fueled form, essentially killing him for good this time. Since you're the Primal Slayer, and Thornton and his knights are now, well, primals, you are forced to fight them and handily defeat them. Before Thornton dies, he sees you as a dark entity towering over him, and it's here where we first get the idea of how utterly terrifying the Warrior of Light actually is. He looks at you, baffled as to how you defeated him, and utters 3 words.
What are you?
That's very interesting.
Remember this scene, we will come back to it later.
Istinian arrives and attempts to claim the second eye of Nidhogg, thinking his long journey of vengeance is finally over, only for things to go terribly, terribly wrong. Both eyes fuse to his body, and the spirit of Nidhogg possesses the Dragoon, being remade into a new body from Istinian's own. It is horrifying. Nidhogg vows revenge before flying away. Midgardstormer appears lamenting his son's anger and flies you to safety as the reactor in the facility explodes. You return to Ishgard on Midgard's back to the shock of all the citizens. You give them all the first encounter with the dragon that wasn't filled with bloodlust, marking the first steps towards lasting peace with the dragons.
Come what may, we will never cease to believe. Upon the souls of they who have sacrificed themselves to pave the way for peace, we will never abandon our cause.
1,000-year war cannot be ended in a day. It may take generations. What thou dost begin, thy children must continue. entrust unto them thy hopes and dreams, that peace may reign again, and forevermore.
Ishgard is then reinstated as a member of the Eorzean Alliance with Emmerich as its new leader. You place Haurchefant to rest on a cliff overlooking Ishgard, leaving his shattered shield next to his grave. And thus ends Heavensward. Now, before we get into the analysis section of Heavensward, I think it best we go through the post-Heavensward content as well. Post-Heavensward is split into two parts, the Dragon Song War, which sort of acts as a conclusion to Heavensward, and the Warriors of Darkness arc, which acts as an epilogue and transition into Stormblood and Shadowbringers as well. Post-Heavensward is a bit crazy, y'all. Unlike post-A Realm Reborn, post-Heavensward content feeds off of and expands upon the themes of the base expansion, especially the Dragon Song War. So, picking up where we left off, Ishgard is in a temporary peace with Emmerich as the leader, but he wants to make it a bit more official. So, he sends you to broker a peace with the dragon Vidofnir, one of Hraesvelgr's children. She's open to the idea, but there are rumblings that a nearby tribe of bug people called the Vath are preparing to summon their primal Ravana. To kill time until then, you decide you can try to hunt down exactly where Minfilia and Thancred got off to. Like I said, no one gives a shit about Yda and Papalymo.
Hello there.
Welcome.
Fortunately, a Sharlayan scholar and leader of a subsect of researchers called the Students of Baldessian, named Kryl, joins up with you. She's a close personal friend of Minfilia and former mentor to the twins. She also has the Echo, which is the same kind of blessing of light that you have. Most of the Scions have blessings of light, but they are usually pretty minor. Some few, such as you, Minfilia, Isael, and now Kryl, have what is called the Echo. You can think of it as like the Blessing of Light Plus. The Echo allows you to resist primal power, which has the ability to mind control those without the Echo through a process called tempering. The Echo also allows you the ability to understand all languages, past and present, spoken on Hydaelyn. In addition, the Echo manifests itself in different ways to different people. For you, it allows the Warrior of Light to see flashes of memories of past events at certain points. Minfilia's Echo allows her to communicate with Hydaelyn directly, and for Kryl, it allows her to see and track ethereal energies in both people and objects, an arguably very useful talent. I love Kryl. Not only is she incredibly smart and cunning when she needs to be, but the use of her Echo offers intriguing glimpses into other experiences of those blessed by Hydaelyn. Unlike you, she's not really a fighter, so she usually has to solve her problems using nothing but her wits and intelligence, and I love characters like this. I just wish the developers wouldn't constantly forget about her all the time.
Suffice it to say, social graces were not among his list of talents. Striding up to his seniors on his first day, head held high. What was it he said again?
Thank you, Kryl.
For what? I haven't finished yet. Would you care to attempt a more dexterous deflection?
Anyway, back on topic. Kryl says that she has a way to track Minfilia with the use of an artifact in Matoya's possession. You go back to Matoya, and she is so charmed by the scholar that she lets her just use the artifact. I mean, come on. How could you not be charmed by this? She's wearing foxier coat. That's so fucking adorable. Unfortunately, you cannot find Minfilia, but she does discover that Thancred's energy reformed near a mountain in the Dravanian foothills where the Vath live. You decide the best way to draw Thancred out is to defeat the newly summoned Ravana, but before you can do so, you discover that a band of heroes has beaten you to the punch. Despite having similar goals, the warriors appear hostile. Calling themselves the Warriors of Darkness, they immediately attack you.
Warriors of Darkness? Really?
Despite giving it your all, for the first time you are supremely outmatched and defeated. The leader of the warriors, calling himself Arbert, explains that they are trying to destabilize the ethereal energies in the world by forcing tribes to summon primals in rapid succession and then kill them. Doing so pulls vital ether from the land and can lead to chaos across the realm. He also claims to be working for the Ascians. He goes to kill you, but you are saved at the last moment by a revived and extremely badass-looking Thancred. Together, you manage to drive the warriors off, but they vow to continue their campaign of chaos. Reunited with Thancred, and it feels so good. He reveals he arrived on the mountain somewhat, well, in his birthday suit. Female fans and gay fans rejoice. He befriended the Vath and was gonna meet up with the Scions after taking care of Ravana, but the Warriors of Darkness made things difficult for him. So, you return to Vidofnir, who reveals that her father, Hraesvelgr, has allowed any of his brood to make up their own minds about the peace that Ishgard offers. Vidofnir says they've chosen to accept. You can't even deliver the good news, though, as there are riots in the city over the proposed peace. Turns out not everyone wants to make up with the creatures that, murdered their families. Emmerich gets a new dagger in his abdomen for his trouble. Don't worry, he gets better. And everything is in chaos. Emmerich recovers thanks to Fortom's help, but radical remnants of the church have kidnapped several Ishgardians, and just in case you think you're supposed to empathize with these guys and their crisis of faith, one of the priests tries to murder a goddamn child. Yeah, here's a piece of advice. If you're ever trying to convince people your cause is just, maybe don't do shit like this. At the last second, Vidofnir rescues the child, showing that peace with dragons is not entirely out of reach. Preparations are made for a peace summit outside Ishgard, so meantime you set about trying to locate Minfilia, the last of the missing Scions. So, you go back to Matoya, who points you in the direction of an extra-dimensional tower called the Anti-Tower. It's literally just a tower turned upside down. Awesome. This game is so weird. After an absolutely horrifying fight with the embodiment of all my nightmares, you manage to contact Minfilia. Yay! But she says she can't come back. Yay! Because she has been chosen to be the voice of Hydaelyn, and she is busy thwarting the machinations of the Ascian dark god Zodiark. Thancred is upset, but you decide to leave well enough alone for now and head to the Peace Summit. Everything seems calm and going well. A little too well, if you ask me. Where is our sudden but inevitable betrayal?
You were right, my friend. You look tired. Reckon you could do with a good long rest?
Ah, there it is. Having learned exactly nothing from the Nanimo incident, you drink wine gifted to you by a maid who seems a bit too eager for you to drink it. After passing out, the Echo grants you a vision, informing you that the maid had her entire family killed by the dragons, and she is in no mood for peace. Thancred wakes you up just in time to witness the assassin hijack the peace proceedings to declare that there can be no peace with dragons. Things are getting out of hand, so Emanalane, God, I hope I'm saying that right, one of Harshafan's brothers orders one of his guards to stop the woman. If you're wondering where he came from, it's not because this character just appeared out of nowhere. To be honest, I kind of forgot about him. He's usually not very interesting. Anyway, the guard takes his orders to mean that he should fire arrows into the woman until she stops talking. Well, I guess that's one way to shut her up. And then everyone looks at Emanalane like he's the monster, which, okay, look. The man is incompetent, but it was clearly not his fault that a guard took the order to stop a woman from hijacking a summit as, murder that bitch. Hey bud, do me a favor, huh? How about you make that girl up there into a pincushion? Don't worry, I got you, bro. Emanalane flees, and the Scions confront him, but he is inconsolable. Thancred tells him to get a grip on himself, and Emanalane decks him in the face for his trouble. Yeah, how did you think that was gonna go, dude? With the peace talks in jeopardy, Emmerich decides the best way to unite people is in a friendly competition of combat with the other nations of the Orzian Alliance. What? There are riots in the street and all of Ishgard is on the brink of war and you want to hold a festival? Okay, sure, whatever. After a pointless battle royale that becomes pretty one-sided once you get involved, Emmerich decides the problem is solved and peace talks can continue. Really? That's all it took, huh? Vidofnir meets Emmerich in front of the gathered crowd, where they unveil a carving depicting Hraesvelgr and Shiva together.
Brothers and sisters, ye who stand as witness, hearken to me! Since the days of Eld, when the bonds betwixt man and dragon were sundered by our hand, our peoples have known only war. Bloodshed without end, losses beyond counting, and still we fought. And still we fought. Some wounds do not heal. The dead cannot be returned to us. But we, the living, can yet choose another course. Here and now, we can lay down this burden, this hatred, this vengeance. Our forebears fought not so that we could die, but that we might live. So let us honor their sacrifice and spare our children this death sentence. Let us gift them a new legacy. Life.
Everything seems to be going well until Nidhogg, in the guise of Estinian, literally stabs Vidofnir in the back. He then declares that there can never be peace with mankind. The gathered Ishgardians claim that for peace to continue, Nidhogg must be killed, and Estinian along with him, much to the horror of Alphino and the other Scions.
Nidhogg! Death to 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 Nidhogg!
It is agreed to try and appeal to Hraesvelgr for aid. Hraesvelgr is reluctant to intercede, but Alphino reminds him that he is not entirely given up on humanity, otherwise he wouldn't have helped Ysael save the Scions at Azazla. Midgard Sormer also entreats his son to not give up hope. Hraesvelgr then decides if he's going to aid the Scions, he needs to first test if they are up to the task. After defeating him in combat, the mighty worm agrees to help you. Just in time too, as Nidhogg and his followers are assaulting the city. Things are desperate, and it looks like Nidhogg might finally triumph against his age-old enemies when out of the sky comes you riding Hraesvelgr. Together, you choose to confront Nidhogg, who defeats his brother quite easily. He mocks Hraesvelgr for his passivity all these years and his weakness for the humans due to his lover Shiva, ripping out Hraesvelgr's eye and wing in the process. Hraesvelgr then reveals why he lost. His other eye is already gone. Nidhogg demands an explanation, but quickly realizes that Hraesvelgr gifted the eye to you to help you be on equal footing with his brother. And now all the pieces are in place for the final showdown. Hatred versus unity. Revenge versus reconciliation. After a suitably epic fight, Nidhogg shows no signs of giving quarter. But you discover that Estinian is fighting back, trying to regain control of his body, though it seems he's barely hanging on. With what little lucidity he has left, he demands Alphino and the Warrior of Light kill him. Alphino refuses, seeing Estinian as a brother. Together, you decide to fruitlessly remove the eyes attached to his body. The eyes fight back, and just as it seems like they are going to consume you both, the large quantities of ether contained within the eyes, combined with the passion with which you fight, summon two entities of the dead, specifically the spirits of Ysael and Horshaphant. With their help, you are able to remove the eyes, free Estinian, and kill Nidhogg once and for all. And this scene is so important in retrospect, it blows my mind. Remember this scene because there are major plot points in Endwalker that people have been saying comes out of nowhere, and this scene exists. Anyway, we'll come back to that when we get to Endwalker. For now, things calm down, you cast the eyes into the abyss below Ishgard, and peace goes forward as planned, bringing the Dragon Song War to a close. Okay, wait. We're almost done, but not quite. You remember these guys? The Warriors of Darkness? Yeah, whatever happened to them? Not to worry, we haven't forgotten about them. After things settle down in Ishgard, you make good on a promise to have dinner with Emmerich, but this adorable little date is interrupted by Thancred, who explains he found Alize, Alphino's sister. This girl, way back here, she's in critical condition. She had apparently been trying badly to track the Warriors of Darkness and their movements when she was shot with a poisoned arrow by the archer. Alphino is distraught at his sister's condition, but she implores you to hurry and stop the Ixal from resummoning Garuda. Confused, you do as she asks and try to prevent the resummoning, only for the Warriors of Darkness to appear accompanied by a mysterious masked Elizin, who has been telling them exactly where to go and where to strike. Alphino demands an explanation of their behavior, and it is insane. Okay, so apparently, the world of Hydaelyn is not only made up of the physical planet, or star, but also 13 other worlds or reflections. The main world is referred to as the source, while the 13 reflections are referred to by their numbers. Creative. You can think of the reflections as alternate worlds or universes. What happens on a reflection or shard affects the source and vice versa. In fact, each of the 7 calamities that has occurred is caused by one of the shards being destroyed. Each shard is also susceptible to elemental interference. For example, the 13th shard became the Void when an excess of dark energy consumed it entirely. The Warriors of Darkness are actually from the first shard, which is currently undergoing a similar process, only instead it is being consumed by primordial light. There is a theory that by destroying or causing unbridled chaos on the source, it can sever its connection to the other shards, thus preventing the flood of light from consuming the first. It's a bad, very wrong theory, but we'll get back to why much later. The Warriors of Darkness then teleport away, declaring that this is only the beginning. Well, that seems ominous. Alize seems to have recovered at this point, and the Scions head back to Urianger for answers. He says he's been informed that another summoning of Titan is also underway. He decides to do more research while you work with a cute kobold named Gabu to stop the Titan from being summoned, and his parents are dead. Sacrificed to Titan, which makes him go catatonic and summon Titan from his own despair. Feel-good game of the century! Amidst all of this, the Scions discover that large amounts of aetherite crystals are being smuggled into the outskirts of Alamigo, which is usually a sign of summoning. Alamigo is the nation to the far east of Eorzea, which is still occupied by the Empire. You go to investigate, running into, hey, Yida and Papa Lima along the way. There you are. Where the f*** have you guys been? Apparently, they've been investigating too, but haven't revealed themselves to the other Scions because they wanted to keep a low profile. In the course of your investigation, you learn of a movement forming to retake Alamigo led by a man called the Griffin. You confront one of his decoys who reveals that he already gave the crystals to the Amalja for the purposes of summoning Ifrit to defend themselves from attack. You rush to stop it, only to find who else? The Warriors of Darkness, in the process of slaughtering the Amalja in an effort to make them summon Ifrit. The leader, Arbert, declares that he must do this. Send the source into chaos to save his world. He decides that the best way to achieve this is to instead kill you. A fight ensues, but it becomes clear the warriors also have the blessing of Hydaelyn, and you are defeated. Just as all seems lost, the warriors' mysterious masked ally turns out to be Urianger. My man was playing the long game all along. He frees the Scions and prepares to turn the tables as Alize prepares one final spell to finish the Warriors of Darkness. After successfully defending her, the warriors lie defeated, but they refuse to concede. Alphino surmises that in order to have traveled to the source beyond the rift, the warriors would have had to become like the Ascians. That is to say, they would have had to renounce their bodies and, in essence, die on their world.
At long last you see. To save our world, we gave our lives. We were just adventurers trying to make our way. An odd job here, a favor there. We never aspired to be warriors of light. But word of our deeds spread, and soon people were calling us heroes. They placed their hopes and dreams on our shoulders, and bid us fight for all that was good and right. We fought, and we fought, and we fought, until there was no one left to fight. We won! And now our world is being erased from existence. We did everything right. Everything that was asked of us, and still it came to this. You of all people should understand. We will not falter. We brought our world to the brink of destruction, and now we must save it.
Urianger then demands that you present your Crystal of Light along with the Warriors of Darkness, and pleads Hydaelyn to intervene. Speaking through Menphilia, Hydaelyn declares that she has not forgotten about the First, and would send Menphilia back with Arbor and his friends to stem the Flood of Light. Arbor is distraught, as she only now deigns to answer their prayers and attacks, but Menphilia stops him. Urianger reveals he played both sides so that this meeting would be possible, to save the First and free Menphilia.
You orchestrated all of this, not to save her, but to send her away!
One life for one world. Such was the bargain, and you the coin, though it were not mine to spend.
Menphilia then says a final goodbye to her friends, and Arbor apologizes to you for standing against you, and hopes that someday you learn from his mistakes.
We were blind to the truth once, so I tell you this, as one fool to another. Light, dark, it doesn't matter. What matters is how you choose to use them. We made our choice and you see what came of it, so please, forge a different path. Seize a better fate.
With that taken care of, you set your sights on the Griffin, who seems poised to force Eorzea's hand. Dressing his men in the garb of the Alliance nations, he attacks the border separating Alamigo from the rest of Eorzea, hoping to drag everyone back into a war for freedom. You confront the Griffin and discovered it to be Ilberd. This douchebag who tried to kill Nanamo because he thought it would be fun? Fantastic. You try to talk him down, but he is done talking, and he's completely gone off the deep end. His men on the inside of the Garlean Empire kill his own men in a ritual of blood and sacrifice as he presents the eyes of Nidhogg recovered from the abyss by the Hassians. Yeah, when are people going to realize that simply throwing shit off a cliff doesn't solve anything? Clearly not Ilberd, as he throws himself off a cliff. The combination of blood, Ilberd's hatred, and the power of the eyes summons a terrible primal dragon. Papalimo realizes what he must do and uses Tup Samadhi, Louisoix's old staff, to bind the dragon as his old teacher tried to do with Bahamut. Yida demands Papalimo not perform the spell, but Thancred carries her away.
Take her! Please, you have to take her!
What? No! Damn it, Thancred! Put me down! Thancred!
This is one battle you cannot fight. Away with you! Go! I think he means now!
You are forced to watch as the brave Lalafell successfully binds the primal, but at the cost of his own life. Papalimo's sacrifice was only a temporary measure, though, At a loss as to what to do when the Primal breaks free, the sad musings are interrupted by Nero, who claims that the only way to defeat the Primal is to find and activate Omega. That super weapon that Tweedledee was trying to use? Yeah, that one. It's at this point that we meet one of my favorite characters, Gosetsu. Apparently, he rode all the way from the eastern land of Doma in a rowboat with no sleep or food. Just to put this into perspective, Doma is basically as far as China is from Europe. It's only when someone points out how utterly insane this is that he collapses. Fucking legend. That's how he's introduced. Gosetsu came to Eorzea to bring back Yugiri as bad things are happening in their homeland. Yugiri claims she cannot leave as she owes the Scions much, and must help them with this new Primal. Not one to turn down a challenge, Gosetsu agrees to help as well. You journey to Omega's resting place only to be accosted by an individual called Grinavat? Yeah, I have no fucking idea how to pronounce this one. He reminds me of Puri Puri Prisoner from One Punch Man, so that's his name now. Puri Puri Prisoner tries to stop you, but is defeated quite easily and runs away like a little punk. Yida then demands that she be the one to release Omega as her way of getting vengeance for Papalimo. The dragon wakes up and fights Omega in a scene so epic they had to stop supporting the game on PlayStation 3 to make it happen. Seriously. The fight is pretty even, and both of the combatants end up falling somewhere in Garabania, the region where Alamigo is located. The Domans begin to call the dragon Shinryu, or Death Incarnate. You then go to check up on Yida, who reveals her true name is Lise, and Yida was her dead sister who she tried to honor. Wait, what? Why was this necessary? What the kind of a reveal is that? No, don't roll the credits, that's how we're ending? What? What the So obviously there's quite a lot to unpack here. Heavensward doesn't feel like your typical sort of fantasy fare. The Dragon Song War isn't as easy to parse as a battle between good and evil like can be so easily claimed about A Realm Reborn. The war isn't so simple. From top to bottom, the war is over ideals, lies, and long-standing prejudices about the other side. Heavensward examines hope through the lens of hatred and reconciliation. Each of the characters in the expansion grapples and struggles with their own biases and hatreds. The idea of vengeance is examined and deconstructed, about how vengeance is often misconstrued as a form of justice, but really it is just a self-destructive path that ultimately leads into a vicious cycle. This is what truly separates Heavensward from the base game. Whereas A Realm Reborn focuses on the clash between epic powers and vast conspiracies, Heavensward focuses on the characters' motivations and conflicts. A Realm Reborn is very much plot-driven, whereas Heavensward is more character-driven. Now, I don't mean to say that one style of storytelling is superior to another. Plot-driven narratives can be very impactful and fun. Just look at how Lord of the Rings and Star Wars do things. If the plot is compelling and the protagonist sympathetic, we can still have a good time, even if we don't fully understand the characters beyond a surface level. We know what they want, they have a clear goal, and a villain to pit themselves against. We know Aragorn is a reluctant king, but ultimately he wants to do what is best for his people and the world. He has an arc. But do we know more about him other than he wants to defeat Sauron and loves Arwen? What would Aragorn actually be like as a king? How does he make decisions that help the realm but may hurt someone else? How does he compromise his morals and ethics to achieve greater good in the long run? Luke Skywalker wants to defeat the evil empire. That's his entire motivation. But what future does he see for the Republic? For the Jedi? Star Wars tries to answer these questions with The Last Jedi, but that's a whole other can of worms that I'm not going to get into today. The point is, we don't need to know characters on an intimate level in order to enjoy a plot-driven narrative. Conversely, character-focused narratives can be done really well, like the first few seasons of Game of Thrones, Avatar: The Last Airbender, any movie by the Coen brothers, etc. But they can also be executed poorly if the characters are boring or their actions don't make sense in the context of what they claim to be, such as some of the worst Marvel movies, the last few seasons of Game of Thrones. So I don't think one style of narrative storytelling is better than the rest, but I will say that I personally gain more enjoyment and get more out of a narrative that is driven wholly by the actions of its characters and their many flaws, rather than a series of actions the characters react to. And man oh man, are there a ton of characters in this expansion. What's remarkable about it is that each character is also given time to develop and communicate their worldview, and all of them make a lot of sense from a certain perspective. Isael, Estinian, Emmerich, Alphino, Nidhogg, Hraesvelgr, Thordan, and yes, even the Warriors of Darkness are given a spotlight at various points. And even if you don't agree with them or their methods, you can at least understand them, which is what makes the Dragon Song War such a tragedy. Something that must be put right, despite how hard it may seem to do so. The war was not started or ended because of some nebulous struggle between good and evil. It started and ended because of the actions and beliefs of the people who lived through these events. It's for this reason that Heavensward is considered the start of something great. The themes it brings up are so universal and have no easy answers, but it never tries to shy away from that fact. You're told throughout the expansion that ending the war is not going to be easy, and even if you succeed, the fight for peace is a never-ending one. But there is always hope. Hope that people and dragons can rise above their hatred and find common ground together. But as much as I love Heavensward, there are definitely some things that I feel don't work for me. So, for the sake of fairness, before I talk about what made this expansion great, we need to talk about some things I think did not work well. So firstly, while I think most of the story of Heavensward is decently paced, there are parts of it that do drag. A lot of times it feels like we're just doing busy work, and maybe it's my bias against Mughals, but I could not stand the entire mini-arc that saw us doing favors for them for the chance for them to summon Hraesvelgr, hence why I skipped it in the summary. The Ascians are also just not very interesting at this point. It seems like Heavensward just didn't know what to do with them, a problem they would continue to suffer from till Shadowbringers. They're just generic evil bad guys at this point, and yes, I know that the things they are doing in this expansion in light of the revelations of Shadowbringers makes it more interesting in retrospect, but that's not how storytelling works. An endpoint retroactively making the whole thing better isn't going to matter to someone who doesn't finish the story. The eyes also felt a bit too much of a contrived plot MacGuffin for me. Granted, they used them well, but I was so done with them when we threw them over the ledge. It just felt cheap for the Ascians to once again use them. Also, while Heavensward has many fantastic villains, I cannot bring myself to give a shit about Ilberd. I'm sorry, I know a lot of people like him, but he committed the cardinal sin of villainy for me. He's just f***ing boring. He's so forgettable, and besides acting as a catalyst for Stormblood and birthing that one meme, Sloppy, I always forget he exists. Not every villain needs to be amazing with depth, but even Xenos in Stormblood was more interesting than Ilberd, and people hate him because he's so, quote-unquote, simple. I mean, they're wrong, but we're not going to talk about that right now. My biggest issue with Heavensward, though, is the massive retcon they did with the whole Sultana arc. And yes, it was a retcon. I don't want to sound unsympathetic because I know that the writers realized they kind of wrote themselves into a pickle. They wanted to tell this big plot conspiracy arc with a betrayal, secret plans, double dealings, and all that, but then realized that they didn't know how to move forward from there. I think the developers realized that the end of A Realm Reborn was a mistake and set about wrapping it up in a tight bow as quickly as possible so we could get back to the dragons. The whole point of us going to Ishgard was because the Scions were criminals and we literally had nowhere else to go. It seemed like the story was setting us up to clear our names and unravel the conspiracy, but the whole issue is wrapped up in the first, third of the expansion. It seemed like all the consequences of the betrayal were completely negated. Rauban is fine, sans his arm, all the Scions are still alive, hell, even the Sultana is still alive. Aside from Menphilia becoming the voice of God or whatever, it feels like there were zero consequences for what happened. And from this point on, it's basically never mentioned again. The tensions between the monarchy and the monitress is never really addressed, and the Sultana doesn't even go through with her plan to abdicate. The fact that it was this guy's master plan to secretly keep the Sultana alive while paying off the Braves makes no goddamn sense. What was the fucking point of all this? Maybe it sounds like I'm nitpicking, but it's a glaring issue in a game that usually has very tight storytelling. The potential ramifications of the Sultana's death and the political upheaval it would cause for the realm would have been really interesting. But the developers decided they didn't want to tell that story, which is fine. What we got in exchange was still amazing, so I can't be too upset about it. It just feels like a missed opportunity. Anyway, let's talk about the good things about Heavensward and what marked it as a turning point for Final Fantasy XIV. The biggest reason for Heavensward's success, as I've mentioned before, are its characters. Each of the characters grapples with the main themes in their own way. They each have their own prejudices and preconceived notions of justice, and, much like the villain, they're wrong. The difference is Nidhogg refuses to accept he is wrong right to the bitter end. The rest of the story is the other characters learning to overcome their hatred and their preconceptions and come to the realization that their particular worldview is flawed or even wrong. What makes Heavensward so different from the base game is that each of the characters have their own arcs, not just you. They don't act as vehicles to drive the plot. They act like real humans with complex thoughts and ideologies. So to talk about Heavensward, we need to talk about each of the characters individually. First, let's discuss Ysayle. Ysayle is a very interesting character. She's introduced to the game as an antagonist in A Realm Reborn, a pretty ruthless one at that. Initially, it seems like she would love nothing more than to see Ishgard burn. But Heavensward softens her a bit. After she is told of the horrendous casualties of innocent people on the Steps of Faith, she's horrified. She claims her goal has always been to bring the truth to people and dismantle the Holy See. While Ysayle's goals are indeed noble, her methods are flawed. Taking down a corrupt theological institution that brainwashes, lies, and uses its populace to further its own ends is nothing if not admirable. But it becomes clear to the player and to Ysayle that the way she's going about doing that paints her as little more than a terrorist. Rather than bringing justice to those evil men, the actions of Ysayle and her cult serve only to cause suffering to the very people she is trying to save. As is evidenced by the maid who calls upon the people to not accept peace, the Dragonsong War has left deep scars, and further fighting only serves to deepen those wounds. She claims she wants to save the people of Ishgard, but her actions speak to the contrary. Ysayle eventually has to reconcile that her crusade does not come from a place of love or a need for justice for those that were betrayed so long ago. It takes Hraesvelgr himself confronting her on her ideals for her to finally realize the truth. She's too blinded by her own hatreds, her own ego that hers is the righteous path, that she can't see the suffering her war has caused. After Nidhogg's death, she finally realizes that justice cannot come through violence, but through the harder fight of reconciliation and peace.
The endless cycle of violence between man and dragon was born of our forefathers' treachery. You have followed me, bled with me, to bring this truth to light that we might all know peace. But Nidhogg is dead. Nidhogg is dead, my friends! He who bore such hatred towards Ishgard is dead! Let his hatred die with him, I say! Let us sheathe our swords and go in peace!
Have we lost?
No, my friend! Far from it! At long last, the peace for which we have so desperately fought is within our grasp. And I, for one, would not forsake it.
Ysayle starts the story thinking she is better than Estinian, and by the end, she comes to the realization that she really isn't. And speaking of Estinian, we now need to talk about our favorite Blue Dragoon. Estinian is perhaps my favorite character in Heavensward. It's tempting to think that throughout the expansion, Nidhogg is ultimately your enemy, the one you need to pit your ideals against like Gaius before him. But that isn't exactly true. The true idealistic villains the Warrior of Light needs to face are Thordan in the base expansion and Arbert and the Warriors of Darkness in the post-expansion. Both these characters embody an imposed ideal that comes in direct conflict with the Warrior of Light and what they stand for. Nidhogg doesn't, and that's because he isn't your ideological nemesis. he's Estinian's. This fact is constantly alluded to, by Estinian himself no less. Estinian exists because of Nidhogg. Nidhogg killed his family, and since then it drove him to become the Azure Dragoon, an unstoppable slayer of dragons. He is driven by vengeance. It consumes his very essence to the point that it nullifies any chance for an alternative solution for him. Sound familiar? Nidhogg too is consumed by vengeance. It's why he continues this pointless war. He believes man and their descendants must suffer for his loss, the loss of his family. Towards the end of the expansion, Estinian comes to realize this. He finally begins to understand that he and Nidhogg are one and the same. Both beings of distilled hatred, making vengeance, murder, and unending suffering as the only true ideal form of justice. After Estinian slays Nidhogg, he realizes that he ultimately feels nothing. That unending quest that drove him forward, that made him forsake all other ambitions, it's finally over, and what's left now? Nothing. An empty hunger that can't be filled.
But you have rid the world of a hate-filled creature, and ended a bloody war in so doing.
I lost my family to Nidhogg's flames, and 'twas with fury in my heart that I took up the lance. Every blow I struck in the name of vengeance. We were not so different, he and I.
I will not judge you for your deeds. I have not the right. Too many innocents have perished in the name of my greater good.
It's at this point that he realizes the true tragedy of Nidhogg and, by extension, himself. It was never going to be enough. Those that betrayed the dragons and the ones that killed Nidhogg's love are long dead, but the worm was never satisfied. He continues to slaughter those who never were even alive to witness such events. They are so far removed from the incident that they don't even know the true story. So what exactly is it that Nidhogg is fighting for? Just who is he trying to bring to justice? Nidhogg acts as a dark mirror for Estinian, showing him what he could have become eventually if he didn't have friends to lean on and bring him back from the brink. His possession by Nidhogg makes this even more overt. We see an Estinian unleashed, a man driven only by his hatred, anger, and lust for vengeance. A man who forsakes the very idea of peace. Everyone, even Estinian, believes that the only solution is for him to be put out of his misery. Everyone, that is, except Alphinaud. Of all the characters, Alphinaud is the one that feels like he has the most growth in this expansion. He's come a long way from the bratty, cocksure Redditor he used to be in A Realm Reborn. Heavensward also makes the best case for the idea that Alphinaud is what is referred to as the deuteragonist. That is to say that he is the second most important character in the story besides the protagonist, you. In a game, that can be kind of risky. If a character is as important or more important than the player character, the player can start to feel resentful that the character is stealing their thunder, outperforming them and taking credit for their deeds. Such a feeling can become magnified in a game when the player character doesn't get voiced lines, while the other character does. But I think the developers of Heavensward managed to walk that tightrope well with Alphinaud. It would be a different story in the next expansion with Lys. Oh, don't you worry, Lys. We'll get to you. We'll get to you. Anyway, Alphinaud wears the crown of deuteragonist well. Arguably better than he did in A Realm Reborn. In the base game, Alphinaud came across as a smug, self-righteous piece of shit. He always seemed like he thought he knew more than you. And for the majority of the story, the writing framed him as correct more often than not. It wasn't until the post-A Realm Reborn content that the writers would begin to challenge this characterization. Alphinaud's arrogance is shown to be just that, arrogance. He's a naive young boy who wants to save the world, but it was never for the right reasons. He didn't want to make the world a better place, he wanted to satisfy his own ego, and the story holds him to task for that. It's made clear multiple times that both Alphinaud and his sister are constantly living in the shadow of their grandfather's deeds. Everyone expects them to live up to that name, and that amount of pressure on literal children can become a burden. Alisaie sought to move past this by going her own way and doing what good she could through her grandfather's example. Alphinaud sought to surpass him. It becomes clear by the end of the expansion that Alphinaud has learned where he went wrong. He cared too much about being the savior of the realm, and saw his friends and scions as merely tools to achieve that end, and it blew up in his face. So, when it comes time to confront a possessed Estinian and to defeat Nidhogg, Alphinaud has a choice. He can either repeat the mistakes of his past, do what is good for the realm, and put down Estinian like a rabid dog, or he can rise above his old self and do what is right, even if it may prove futile or even impossible. In most stories, the hero has to learn to put the needs of his friends aside for the good of the whole community. But Alphinaud's arc is unique in that in order to be a true hero, he needs to disregard what everyone is telling him he should do and listen instead to his heart. He must choose friends over the realm. Alphinaud's arc is him coming to the realization that he is not the hero, nor the savior of the realm. He is merely a person who wants to make the world a better place for his friends and those he cares about. So while everyone, even Estinian, tells him that the right thing to do is kill him, Alphinaud says no. He chooses in that moment not to do what is expected of him, not what would give him the most adulation and respect, but what his heart tells him is right. No one would have blamed him had he killed Estinian. They might have even called him a hero. But Alphinaud's true turning point is for the first time in his life, he doesn't care about any of that. He only wants to save his friend. And in accepting that he isn't a hero, he becomes an even greater one. But of course, no Final Fantasy story is complete without its villains, so let's take a look at the major antagonists of Heavensward. Except these guys. And no, not you either. The first major antagonist we need to look at is Thordan, the, let's say, least complex of the expansion villains. Except, well, you know. Thordan's motivations are not really all that complicated. He's a guy in charge who wants to stay in charge and will do anything and everything to maintain that. We don't really get a huge amount of insight into whether he truly believes all the rhetoric and gospel he espouses about the war and the foundations of Ishgard. It's possible that he truly believes he is upholding their vaunted institutions and protecting Ishgard. It's also possible that he is exploiting the fears of an isolationist and xenophobic population to further his own power and justify an insane war that he claims is an effort to regain the lost glory of Ishgard as its old ways crumble around him, but ultimately he only succeeds in causing suffering and misery to the people he says he is trying to protect. Wow, this got a little too real for a second. Sorry. In the long run, though, I don't think it really matters. Whether he's an old man too set in his beliefs to see an alternative, or he is a power-hungry dictator driven to the edge to maintain his slim grasp on power, it doesn't really matter. Thordan is an examination of evil. Sometimes people don't have a good reason for the awful shit they do. Some men don't really give a shit about morality or the greater good. No, sometimes men just want power. And damn everything else. Thordan is still a compelling villain, though, because he embodies the kind of evil that seems all too realistic. And all too familiar. We see the direct results of his appalling actions, and thus we get a sense of satisfaction upon his defeat. That's all we really need from a good villain. So yeah, Thordan not winning any best villain prizes at the end of the day, but he still has a cool fight. Next! Before we touch again on Nidhogg, I feel it's worth our time to examine Arbert and the Warriors of Darkness. I mentioned before how I feel them and Thordan are the true idealistic foes for the Warrior of Light. The reason for Thordan being an idealistic foe for the Warrior of Light is simple enough. You want to end the war, but Thordan loves the war. He thinks it's great, so you need to stop him. He also becomes a primal, and you're the primal slayer, so ipso facto, you need to kill him. The Warriors of Darkness, though, are a bit more nuanced. For all intents and purposes, the Warriors of Darkness are the Scions. There's a reason that their models are all based off of the characters in the original A Realm Reborn trailers. Hell, even Arbert uses the face that represents the Warrior of Light in all the cinematic trailers. Except he has a beard because, you know, he's evil. The twist that the Warriors of Darkness are good guys actually could have been really lame, but it works. We feel for them. Even though we haven't seen their world or how it is suffering, yet, the information we are given makes us fully feel for their struggle. They were just like us. They did everything they could to save their world, and ultimately the Ascians exploited that optimism like they do in so many other would-be heroes. The greatest villains are the ones you can see yourself in. And when Arbor asks you if the situations were reversed, wouldn't you do the same? All the Scions can do is stand in stunned silence. We'll come back to Arbor in Shadowbringers, but he is genuinely one of my all-time favorite characters in this game. He's a good man who ultimately was driven to the brink to save his people. He feels a sense of responsibility to them because ultimately it's his fault that the world is dying. This is something that Final Fantasy XIV loves doing, and it's no coincidence that half the villains you encounter in your journey end up aiding you in some way later on. And that's what made this game so different for me. I think Asmongold said it best. The main difference between World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV is their villains. World of Warcraft villains tend to be rather simplistic, or just rehashes of Arthas because that was the one time Blizzard did it right. A good man who was corrupted by some outside force. And always we are told the only way this can end is by killing them. But Final Fantasy XIV refuses that idea. They show that no one is beyond redemption. They just need the hand extended to them and to make the choice to accept it. And that's what really stuck in my mind while playing this game. If Heavensward was a World of Warcraft story, we would have ended up killing Estinian instead of saving him. And finally, we need to talk about Nidhogg. In a story focused on the theme of hope through the abandoning of hatred, you need to have the living embodiment of the counter-argument. Like many Final Fantasy XIV villains, Nidhogg is a tragic character. He had to witness his broodmate slaughtered by those she sought to help merely for her power. He suffered the loss of countless of his children and even his own eyes. It's kind of hard to blame him for his anger at humanity and his need for vengeance. But, as we saw with Estinian, anger is a corrupting force. It eats at your soul until the very idea of peace and reconciliation are laughable to you. Nidhogg wants justice for the wrongs that were committed to him and his family, but all he ends up succeeding in accomplishing is the continued cycle of violence and revenge. The human killed his broodmate, so he killed them, and their descendants swore vengeance and killed his children, so he needed to kill them, and so on and so on. Nidhogg's rage created thousands of Estinians. It's why the war has lasted for 1,000 years. That sounds like an absurd length of time, but imagine a world where history's greatest villains were immortal. All the grudges, all the pain that was caused to you and your people, still as clear to you as yesterday. The dragons, and Nidhogg especially, can't move on as easily as humans. They have seen thousands of years of human cruelty, thousands of years of losing people they care about. It's why Hraesvelgr essentially gives up on humanity. Despite the one mortal who claimed his heart, he has had to suffer betrayal after betrayal by mortals. Perhaps there were several attempts throughout the generations that also sought peace, only for it to fall apart. It's hard to blame Hraesvelgr for being cynical, and Nidhogg believing peace is impossible. But that's what makes the dragons that do agree to peace so remarkable. Mankind can't remember the sins of their forefathers, but the dragons do, and they choose to set all that aside for the chance at ending the cycle. And all it takes is seeing how far gone Nidhogg truly is, how utterly he has abandoned hope, not only for mankind, but for himself and his people. That truly helps push the dragons towards peace. They realize that someone needs to take the first step. Someone needs to forgive in order for their society to ultimately forget. In conclusion, Heavensward asks some big questions. Questions that, especially now, feel more relevant than ever. War stems from hatred. It's like a disease. People feel owed blood in exchange for the blood that they have been forced to lose. Stubborn leaders continue to throw the lives of their people away over marks on a map and old institutions and ideals that are not even relevant anymore. Heavensward shows that all too often we cause war and suffering because of the perceived sins of the past. And while the past can be a teacher, we mustn't lose ourselves to it. Otherwise, we can never find a path to a better future. Thanks everybody for watching. If you like what I'm doing, please support the channel by doing all the regular things that YouTubers ask you to do. I'll see you guys soon for part 3, where we're going to explore Stormblood and its various ups and downs. Take care for now.